We're heading for Australia's most hostile environments to bring you beautiful gardens that are flourishing in even the most challenging landscapes. This garden only gets watered 3, maybe 4 times a year.
Sub-zero temperatures are no match for the creator of this flower-filled nirvana.
I had to get used to -6-degree frost.
A low-maintenance marvel that's thriving even in harsh coastal conditions.
This garden's got it spot on. And high on a hilltop, we discover an inspired dry garden that has withstood the most brutal elements. As harsh as this environment is, I like the fact that Ray's put in lots of plants that look really delicate. So let's get ready to rock.
I love it.
G'day and welcome to Secrets of Beautiful Gardens. Now, Australia is known right around the world as the lucky country, and for good reason. But as gardeners, it can be hard. You know, you've got the windswept, salty coastlines, and then we've got the harshest, driest outback. So it can be a headache for even the greenest of thumbs.
You know, how does the poem go now? I love a sunburned country, all those mountains. Oh, don't forget, of course, the flooding rains and the drought. Now, it might sound beautiful at times, but it's not an ideal picture for a really keen gardener.
That is so true, but for every problem, there's a solution. So we've travelled the width of this wide brown land to find you the most challenging landscapes in the country and the gardens that have been born out of that adversity.
Instead of cursing the harsh elements that confront it, this garden masterpiece faces them head-on. The rugged coastline of the Florio Peninsula in South Australia, an unforgiving place where only the toughest of plants will survive. But even in this hot, harsh environment, one very clever lady has created one unique dry garden by working with nature, not against it. High on the slopes overlooking the mighty Murray's final journey to the sea, you'll find Boat's End. A world-class garden created by Sarah Butterick over 10 years from the ground up.
So what was it like when you first arrived here?
It was an empty paddock.
Had it had sheep on it?
It had cattle on it.
Oh, really?
Well, both, actually.
Yeah.
The wind was incredible. Things would get literally blown out of the ground.
Goodness.
The soil was terrible.
Interesting, because most of us are flat out with compost and manure and soil improvement, but you decided not to go that way.
No, it was too hard. I just thought if you selected the right plants, that would work. I really think it is rolling with the punches. Don't fight nature.
It's just beautiful. What about water? How do you go for water here?
Well, we're on rainwater. It rains in the winter and recharges the soil, and hopefully that's enough to see it through summer. Now, summers are brutal. We get heat waves of sort of 36 to 40 degrees. This all desiccates, basically. First rain in autumn, it comes to life again until spring when, you know, it all starts to flower and happen, and it's fantastic.
It's so different because you've gone the direction you've gone and worked with nature. And that's clever.
And I don't know why more people don't do it.
Yeah. There you go. The bold and architectural structures in the garden are provided by these amazing agave americanas, the blue one and also the variegated form. But right down at ground level, she still kept with the grey and used the succulent cotyledon in amongst the mounds of beautiful, soft, grey pig face, not in flower yet. Colour really is the unifying factor right throughout this whole garden. This is the mesembryanthemum, the ice flowers. There's also the South African daisy, the arctotis. Look at this apricot mass. It goes on for miles in front of the house. How about the amazing lime green of the euphorbia? And then there's a little bit of a contrast. This is the rich cobalt blue of the Dutch iris. the red flowers of the melianthus. Who says you can't have colour in a garden like this? You know, they've cleverly blurred the boundaries to the garden so that it blends into the natural landscape. It really is breathtaking. But maybe what's more important, if you're gardening in these similar harsh conditions, listen to the land, work with the soil, and success will be yours, just like it is here. In a challenging landscape like Sarah's, you can't just sort of toss in plants and hope for the best. You have to give it careful planning and a lot of thought. And that's where the creativity of outback gardening really shines. Later on the show, I visit a garden teeming with over 600 roses that is over 30 years in the making. Well, this garden proves that it can be done, even when the conditions are pretty harsh. But coming up after the break, Jason's living the great Aussie dream, a house by the ocean with a garden that has something for everyone.
And when you combine a beautiful garden with a front yard like that, I reckon you found heaven. Welcome back. Now, Aussies love the beach, and we should. We've got the best coastline in the world. We've got the bluest sea, the whitest sand, and we're renowned around the world for our laid-back beach lifestyle. But living in that same beautiful spot can be an absolute nightmare when it comes to gardening. But we've found a garden that's not just surviving, but thriving in that environment. And when you combine a beautiful garden with a front yard like that, I reckon you found heaven. It's called Sharky's Beach, and we're in the suburb of Coaldale, which is about an hour south of Sydney. And this is what I'm talking about. Just compare it to the neighbours and you can see how steep the slope was. A lot of Australians that live on the coast live on a mountain range like this, and it's a pretty difficult spot to work with. But when you break it up into different levels, it's worth doing. The reason why it works so well is because it's been staged. There's 4 different levels. The first one's a garden bed with some stairs meandering through it, to the crushed granite with the fire pit. Fire pits are probably the trendiest thing you can put in your garden at the moment. Still got the backyard lawn, big enough for a couple of kids to rumble on. In fact, it looks like a sumo circle. The man behind this clever garden design is Grant Boyle. What did this look like when you started?
Oh, it was basically just a big green hill. It was just all grass. There was no usable space. It was just a wasteland, really. We wanted to create a space that was low maintenance. The clients have a busy lifestyle. They've got young kids. They didn't want to spend all day in the garden.
What was your biggest challenge when you went from that sloping lawn to what we see now?
The biggest challenge, I guess, was getting all the material down here. These sleepers, there's 200 of them. They only weigh about 80 kilos each, so...
Well, it's really shortened you up. You've obviously got help. There's a couple of plants here that turn this from a landscape into a garden, and one of them is this pig face. And here it's growing across the crushed granite. It can handle the harshest environments along the coast. That's why you see it as a bank binder. When you walk over the sand and it's fenced off on either side, it's because plants like this are here, keeping the sand where it's meant to be because of their deep root system. And the reason why they can survive in such a harsh environment is because the leaves are just chock-a-block full of moisture. The only thing it doesn't like is bouncing balls and size 10 shoes. But other than that, it can pretty much grow anywhere where it's free draining. You got coastal rosemary there, which have been balled up. They're Westringas. Lamandra tanica, one of my favourite little filler plants. And agaves, a bit of lavender. So you can see that if they got too much water, they'd probably get soft in the centre and die. But this is the one I love the most. It's called Echium. Now, it's got a couple of positives and a couple of negatives. The positives, it's just a beautiful shrub that needs no maintenance. In fact, it doesn't like pruning. The negative, you need to find a space about 4 or 5 square metres to plant it, and it doesn't last really long. About 6 or 7 years, then it starts to yellow and brown off. But the good news is, you could always plant another one. The secret to success of any good landscaping job is choosing the right materials, and This garden's got it spot on. I mean, the stairs and the retaining walls could have easily been done out of brick and rendered walls, but the fact that these are out of second-hand sleepers, yes, they're hard to work with and they're heavy to carry around, they're a nightmare to cut, but when they're in position, they look fantastic. I like the fact that the tops are irregular, so you're not getting a straight line and a retaining wall with a big step at the end of it. It curves round, gently disappears to nothing. But the thing about this garden I like the most is the fact that everyone can enjoy it. The adults can sit back and admire the view and keep toasty warm around the fire, and the kids can run amok in all the other areas. Clever garden design means that the owners of this house have got the best of both worlds. And when it comes to plant selection, well, natives are the way to go. They're tough and hardy and they're used to that environment. Compared to, say, roses, where you'd be working on your garden all the time. You want to be in it and enjoying it. Because who wants to work that hard when the beach is just across the road?
Later on the show, I visit a garden that is a masterstroke in facing the challenge of multiple microclimates. This is a very clever landscape. It's a great credit to Max. And Jason heads up into the Victorian hills to see a unique dry garden that is built to withstand even the most extreme elements.
Even in the harshest, toughest environment, he's built a garden that looks absolutely beautiful.
Welcome back to the show. It's not just extreme climates that can be a challenge when you're trying to create a thriving garden. Up on the Olsenville Plateau, just outside Ballina on the New South Wales far north coast, the subtropical climate can make for a gardener's paradise. But even in the most ideal conditions, Mother Nature likes to mix things up. The gardener we're about to meet originally experienced 4 major problems creating his garden, but he turned those dramas to his advantage to create something very beautiful and unique. But at the moment, this is baking in sunlight. Round the back, it's a very different story.
Hey, Graham.
Hey, Max, how are you?
Good, mate.
I'm pleased to meet you, mate.
You too.
Wow, very different out here, isn't
It
it?
certainly is, yeah.
This is full-on shade.
Bit of a struggle for us, but we take advantage of it.
You started ground level with bromeliads.
We did, yes, and then worked up through gingers, pelargonias, quarterlines. So, yeah, most of the subtropical, tropical plants.
You got the flowers, but the lush vegetation, and that's what gives it that wonderful sort of holiday resort tropical feel.
True, yeah. The colour, the little bursts of colour amongst all the green and that is, yeah, does wonders.
But this colourful garden hides a secret down the back. Wow, now this was Max's biggest challenge of them all. It was just basically an open stormwater channel full of weeds. But he's chosen plants very cleverly. They're all from the Queensland, New South Wales rainforest. Look at the lush green foliage. One of my favourite trees of all, this is the Buckinghamia, the ivory curl tree. Just look at that leaf, isn't it fabulous? The way it splits like that. This plant is just a sensational tree to grow. Behind me, I noticed there's a Davidson plum looking fantastic. Fabulous foliage. And that's the thing about rainforest plants. They look good 12 months of the year, and then they have flowers or fruit. They're an extra attraction. And then, of course, down into the bottom, the actual watercourse itself, the rocks have been returned, and when the water rushes over the top of them, the soil doesn't disappear because the plants are holding it together. This is a very clever landscape. It's a great credit to Max. And another challenge in this garden is the hot westerly sun out the front. On this side of the driveway is the drought garden. Max has chosen all the plants here to survive without any additional water. Now, some are quite common, but he's chosen a couple of very interesting plants, like this fabulous deciduous brachychiton. It's the Illawarra flame tree, but it's the other variety. It's a bit willy-eyed. Beyond it is an evergreen rainforest plant called Evodia. Look at those flowers. They're right inside on the branch, tucked in, secret. You've got to go looking for them. Now, this garden is without a doubt one of the best examples I've ever seen of how important it is to do your research first. Then select your plants to suit the many microclimates that exist throughout your garden. And remember, just 2 years ago, Max was planting all of this area from little tiny tube stock. So it doesn't matter what problems nature throws up at you, there's a great gardening solution just around the corner.
Mate, Max's garden's a great example. You don't have to be in the outback, you don't have to experience extreme heat to have those little environmental changes that make gardening hard.
Exactly right. You know, even in the most ideal conditions, you can still experience multiple microclimates. But the way to success is through really good, clever plant selection. Now, natives are your best bet, but the name native can be misleading because a native plant from Perth may not work in Queensland and vice versa. So if you're going to plant native, you're best to plant local or endemic. Local plants will be pretty good, but endemic plants are super local and have had the best part of 400,000 years of evolution to learn to survive. So they are a foolproof planting for any challenging garden.
And the next garden is a great example of if you get the plants right, you can grow a garden no matter how harsh the conditions. How good's this? I'm in the Victorian high country, cruising around in a Harley. And this is the spectacular Lake Eildon. And we're on our way to meet a young bloke who's very clever. Even in the harshest, toughest environment, he's built a garden that looks absolutely beautiful. You must be Ray.
Hi, how you going?
Hello, mate.
Hi, Jason.
Gee, you live in a beautiful part of the country. I've seen some fantastic landscape, but more importantly, I'm here to look at gardens, mate.
Let's have a look.
So I can see what attracted you to the land, the natural beauty of the place. Ray and his partner bought this stunning but exposed hilltop property just before the Black Saturday bushfires. And while their home was spared, they knew that they needed to quickly start clearing overgrown vegetation.
We had a lot of tea tree all in this area, which is very flammable. So we got the chainsaws out and just removed all that from the house and sort of in the area. After that, it was just left bare spots. So I just started putting in tube stock and native, succulent, and that's what it sort of started as.
And the result is a very unique, low-maintenance, dry garden. I love a fire pit, and when I try and tell people they should put one in the backyard, this is the location that I'm telling them to close their eyes and dream of. Well, you can have this, minus that. And this is really a little bit of Australiano. And here's a new take on outdoor furniture, painted logs topped with synthetic grass. You're never going to solve the world's problems around a water feature, but you will around the fire. As harsh as this environment is, I like the fact that Ray's put in lots of plants that look really delicate. This is pig face. Now, it grows in pretty much every condition. You see it along our beaches, and it's a bank binder growing in sand that's got next to no nutrients. But the best thing about it is you can just snap a piece off, and I can plant that, and it'd grow. And you can see what it can do. Turn into metres and metres of a blanket, and when this is flowering, there's nothing brighter in the garden. Added to the quirky character of the garden, Ray's got lots of cool sculptures dotted around the place. First thing I noticed when you walked into this big garden is this driftwood horse. But there are things in this garden everywhere that draw your eye. Little magpies made out of corrugated iron. If you've got the time, they cost you nothing. And why have pots in the middle of your garden bed? You might put your plants in there that really like it hot and dry. When you put it all together, it's eclectic and it's a beautiful looking garden. And talk about an awesome shed, perfect for a barbie. The view, not bad either. And when you get to this space, it all makes sense, because gardening's about lifestyle. And this here, well, after a hard day in the garden, is the perfect lifestyle. Should have bought my boardies. A dry garden is perfect for Ray's place because he's in a drought-prone area, but you might be asking yourself, what is a dry garden? Well, it's pretty much just set and forget. You plant your garden out, you water it to get established, and then you pretty much turn the tap off and throw your hose away. Later in the show, I'll be rocking out in a coastal garden that's got everything from limestone to lava. This garden is a perfect example of how good it can look. But coming up after the break, Graham's heading to Adelaide to learn the secrets of a cottage garden that's been created in seemingly impossible conditions.
Doesn't matter how difficult things are, you can still create something that's really beautiful. Welcome back to Secrets of Beautiful Gardens. When you're faced with a challenging environment in a garden, you really only have two choices. Do you work with those harsh conditions or do you fight against them? Well, if you're prepared to put in the hard yards and manipulate the natural environment, this next garden proves that no matter what the climate you're facing, you can get your garden to work the way you want it to. Have you ever dreamt of creating a beautiful cottage garden overflowing with perennials and roses, but you think, oh, my soil's not right or I've got the wrong climate? Well, this garden proves that it can be done, even when the conditions are pretty harsh, and a hat is essential. We're just outside Birdwood, an hour's drive northeast of Adelaide. And we're here to visit Alex Cowald, who, over 30 years, has persisted through drought, scorching summers, not to mention freezing winters, to transform frosty flats into a little piece of paradise.
Yes, I've tried to get colour all year round in my garden.
And the perfume, it's an absolute knockout. Alex and husband Neil, a fourth-generation dairy farmer, live on the family's historic property, complete with its original 1880s stone farmhouse. And in the past, this was nothing more than a small veggie patch.
On this side of the house, it was just really all just gravel where we'd parked farm machinery and stuff. A lot of building up with cow manure and mulch over the years. I had to get used to -6-degree frost in winter and up to around 43 degrees. So it sorted a lot of plants out, and whatever I found did well, I would divide up and spread around, which I still do.
You know, that's a real key to success. What works, you repeat planting.
That's right, absolutely.
How do you water a garden like this? Because accessing water would be pretty limited.
So I've got inline drippers all the way through under the mulch. We've got a salty bore. We've got a carefree system on it which doesn't take the salt out, it just changes it so that the plants can cope with it.
How do you get roses looking so good?
Regular pruning and fertilising and deadheading.
So how often would you feed?
Probably every 3 to 4 months.
Right.
And if there's rain coming, if there's no rain, they don't get fed.
And you've got a lot of mulch as well.
Yes, I find pea straw is the best because it rots down. It's fabulous for the soil. Then I don't have to water so often. It keeps everything very moist.
You've got some real favourites of mine, like Double Delight, which is a lovely colour and perfume. But what are some of yours?
Some of mine would have to be Leonardo da Vinci.
Ah, yes, down here.
The pink.
Yes.
Ashram, which we've got the orange. I love orange. And I love floribundas because you get massed heads and they continually flower. I try to stay away from hybrid teas. Because once the flowers are finished, you've got nothing on the bush for a few months.
Yes.
So, yeah, floribundas are my favourite.
Now, if 500 or 600 roses around the house wasn't enough, in 2011, Alex decided to establish a whole new garden. And here it is here. But she chose all sort of ground cover roses. And when you mass plant them, you get less weeds. They're harder to prune, but you get a much better display. I also love the way she's repurposed, reused some of the old farm machinery, giving a new future to some old engineering. On the other side of the house, there are even more roses and more ways to grow them. Like this beautiful rustic timber arbour. The rose is Westerland. Isn't it a beautiful soft apricot colour? It's been powered up with a clematis called Polish Spirit. Smaller flower, but intense rich purple and very easy to grow. Now this would be the perfect weekend job. Plonk in a ladder and grow a clematis over it. Well, I have to say, Alex, it's been a huge thrill to visit your garden. And you've proven, you know, it doesn't matter how difficult things are, you can still create something that's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error, but I love gardening. I love being out here, seeing what will grow, what doesn't, I can change, and I love sharing it with other people.
Well, you've done that today in spades. Now, as much as I admire what Alex has done in the garden, personally, I could never use pea straw in a million years. But I can understand why Alex has used it. It's a very common byproduct in South Australia. But if you're not careful, the peas can start to germinate and you'll end up with a massive headache. So instead of using pea straw, why not go for something like sugarcane? It's another byproduct. But whatever mulch you use, mulch you must. Mulching prevents the sun from baking the soil. It stops the wind from stripping moisture out of the soil, and it helps to maintain the moisture that's already there. A moist soil is a real winner in almost any garden.
Later, from an icy -6 degrees through to a scorching 47. What's the secret behind this garden and nursery that's flowering all year round?
With such incredible extremes, how do you get the garden looking so beautiful?
But next, get ready to rock as I enter the Stone Age. This is how they've laid floors for thousands of years. Welcome back. Earlier in the show, we showed you a seaside garden that had risen to all the challenges of living by the ocean. The next garden is also challenged by coastal conditions, but it's absolutely rocking it. Now, I love a bit of Aussie rock. No, I'm not talking about cold chisel and AC/DC. I'm talking about in the garden. And this garden is a perfect example of how good it can look. This is a pretty special environment. And on a day like today, we'll call it paradise. But it gets some pretty harsh elements. Lots of heavy rain and even the sea spray, which means salt. Now, if you used a normal paver and laid this driveway with it, it'd absorb all that salt and they'd look pretty old and pretty cruddy pretty quick. But because this is a natural river stone, they've picked the flat face of it and laid it into a mortar mix, and it gives it an instant age. It's got the keystones down the side, so it's structurally strong, but really this is how they've laid floors for thousands of years. Back in Roman times, this would have been the main street. I love it. The bulk of the hard landscaping was done in just 2 days. They started with a blank canvas, and then they had big trucks, big rocks, and big cranes. So the stone works as a retaining wall, but it also protects this little garden bed from those harsh winds and salt. These plants will be bank binders with all their roots holding the soil in, and they'll work as a retainer as well. When you look at these stairs, you could easily be mistaken that someone sat here with a chisel and a hammer to get them all nice and flat. But the reality is they're lava stone. And so as the lava comes out of the volcano, it goes layer upon layer. When you quarry it, it splits the same way and you get these nice flat beds. So the only skill for the tradesman is how to lay them so that they're comfortable to walk on. There's been no shaping. Mother Nature did that. Comment. This place is next to a bit of a reserve, and I like the fact that this garden just blends into it. The orange stones that are here and over there are actually existing sandstone from the area. But the new stone, which is a limestone, doesn't look out of place. In fact, nothing looks out of place. The whole house and garden become one because the same stone that's on the driveway are the feature walls. Placing the stones around the tower was such intricate work, tradesmen could only do a square metre a day. The raw material is pretty cheap to buy, but the labour costs, it's getting up there. A coastal garden has to be planted perfectly because of the harsh environment, but a rock garden also needs to be thought about as well. So I like the fact that they've got the little cousinets, the birthday candles, and lots of native grasses. On the coast, plants kind of have to hug the ground so the elements can go over the top of them, and that gives it that natural look. And a great thing about a garden that's this hardy and this clever is that it'll work in just about any environment. So I'm going to try my own rock garden, but this time slap bang in the middle of the burbs. I was particularly blown away with those lava steppers and the use of resilient, drought-tolerant plants. So I want to build a garden that looks a little like what we've seen. I've chosen 3 great big whoppers, and the best thing about it is I won't have to touch them between now and putting them in position. Sit, boo-boo, sit. That's the big rock taken care of, but I'm going to need a few more gems if I'm to build a rock garden. And split sandstone like this is exactly like that lava stone. You can see that you get the natural flat bits, which will make great steppers. And I need some, and that is great service. Thank you, sir. Daddy! I know it's bigger and shinier than my ute, but what about a dog being loyal? And here's my garden. It's a corner block. It's one of those funny gardens. It's not the front of the house, that's around there, but you want it to present well to the street. But the added bonus, I can get the truck nice and close. So that crane is going to lift the stone, put them into positions where I need them, and I won't even have to put down the umbrella. Before the rocks go in, all this has to come out. Go team. That's the easiest sculpture / bench I've ever put into place. Now I'm going to put another one here, and then in the corner as a real feature, I'm going to stand one up on its edge. Seriously, how could I stay mad at that face? Oh, you're so cute. I've managed to stay clean until now, but all that's about to change. So I'm going to put a path in here that doesn't have to be super practical. It's going to be steppers out of this split stone. Do I need to mark it out? Not really. And I'm going to lay them on mud. That way, they won't move. Now, to give the garden a bit of scale, because we've used such large pieces of sandstone, I'm putting in a couple of decent-sized trees. These are water gums. This one's called luscious. They get to about 6-7 metres tall. They've got a nice shape to them. With any luck, this branch will grow over and sort of shade this and tie everything together. And then across the front here, we've got a little woolly bush. Now, this one's called silver streaks. It'll get to about 1.5 metres high. It's not going to give you total privacy from people walking past, but it is going to green the joint up. Really happy with the quality of the plant stock. There's our little birthday candles. It looks better than the ones we saw in the established garden. Now, that's quite an expensive plant, so I've really put it in a prominent position that you're going to see when you walk through this whole garden. But what a showstopper. And my little cousinets, they look great in the garden I showed you earlier, and they look great in this one too. Well, these guys want to get to about 1 metre round, so where I've placed them out, they're probably a little bit too close to the path. But as everyone walks on the path, they'll just be naturally pruned. It'll soften the edges of the stone and look perfect. Now, these guys here are Gymea lilies. They're usually planted as a specimen for their architectural form. But if you clump them up like this, they kind of use each other as scaffold, and they get a bit taller, and they can get to sort of 2.5 metres tall. If they get up there, it'll be a perfect screen for the bedroom window. If you want a plant in your front yard that's going to stop traffic, think about this one. It's a euphorbia called fire sticks. How good is it? It looks like coral that's growing above the ground, not in the barrier reef. Now, it does want to get to nearly 5 metres tall, but the good news is you can cut it back as much as you want, and the cuttings, they'll take like that because they're a succulent. Now, this garden is anything but formal, but it's still balanced. I've got 2 stones here laid down flat, balanced out by the one up there that's standing on edge. You've got 2 water gums here at each end, and to screen the whole thing off and give it a backdrop, just like the colour of the house, I've got some blueberry ash, and they're going to screen off that, the neighbours. Around the heavily planted areas, forest fines. It'll break down and improve the soil. And in the sparser areas and through the steppers, crushed granite. There isn't a garden in this suburb that looks like this, and it's pretty simple. You don't have to be a highly skilled landscaper. You just need to be able to organise that truck to drop a few things in the right place. The big stones, the steppers and the crushed granite at the start, but then picking a few plants that are a little bit different and out of the box make this garden a real talking point. Rocks and stones might drive you nuts when you're digging a hole, but using them in the right way and making features out of them in the garden might just make your garden rock. After the break, Graham visits our final challenging landscape, and you won't believe the paradise that one revered gardener has created from the most unlikely and unforgiving terrain.
The true testament to the fact that you can create an oasis just about anywhere, regardless of what nature throws at you. Welcome back to the show. Of all the challenging landscapes that we've seen on this episode, the final garden that we're about to visit would have to be one of the best drought-affected gardens in the nation. The central Victorian goldfields are truly breathtaking, and the farmers, well, they seem to survive the dry and rugged conditions. And while it's a huge challenge for home gardeners, it's the climate the next fella we're about to meet just loves.
Hi, Graham.
Hello, David. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good?
Good to see you here.
Yeah, lovely to see you. What a beautiful sight.
It is. The guy's looking pretty good. And the sun's come out for you.
Legendary gardener David Glenn is the man behind Lambley's, which is both a garden and a nursery. The Lambley garden is open in the summer and the nursery all year round. And in a place where temperatures can range from -6 in the winter to a scorching 47 degrees in summer, he works wonders with his plants. With such incredible extremes, how do you get the garden looking so beautiful?
Well, in any sort of gardening, you've got to get the soil right. So what we do is we dig the soil as deeply as we can, and we have to use a crowbar here because the soil is so hard.
Right.
Mix a good 4 or 5 inches of compost, top 8 inches of the soil. It's very acid, so we put lime on it.
Right.
And then we plant, and then we mulch. And if people get that right, everything else follows.
It's not really brain surgery, is it? It's
No.
quite straightforward.
It's in gardening, in horticulture, it's the ABC kindergarten.
Yeah. The other ABC to dry climate garden success is no surprise. Stick to hardy dry climate plants. Like this geranium rambling robin. Now, most of the geraniums we talk about are actually pelargoniums. This is a true geranium. Yes, the flowers are smaller, but look at them. There are millions of them, and it's loving the heat. This beautiful plant is Salvia scleria. It's actually a variety called Archibald's super scleria. Now, the leaves don't look like salvias at all, but the flowers sort of do, but they're much bigger than your regular salvia, and a lovely spike, tough and hardy. The plant just next door is a Daphne in full sun. Yes, this is Daphne eternal fragrance. And the sea holly, that eryngium, is called Oxford blue. Now, if you're into bulbs, you'll know Ixias. When I was a kid, the pale blue, almost turquoise Ixia, oh, it was like the black rose. It was just so sought after. Well, it is here, but the owners of the nursery have gone out and they've reintroduced the original ones. That fabulous soft pink, isn't it glorious? And I must admit, I love this pure white. All of these gardens are sitting underneath fabulous olives. Now, there aren't many plants that I can think of where you can canopy prune, lift them up. Olives look great and they're a really handy shade plant. And as for water, well, the beauty of this garden is it barely needs any. This region gets very little rainfall and the garden only gets watered 3, maybe 4 times a year. That proves that this dry climate garden is really working. And as if creating a garden this beautiful in this climate isn't enough, behind this gate is another surprise. Underneath this amazing row of pear trees is Australia's finest display of Salvia nemorosa. It is, in fact, the only place where they're being trialled in the whole country. David is not only a great plantsman, he's a terrific plant breeder. So we have new colours, new heights, every variety. They're more insect and disease resistant. They're more robust. And let me give you a little tip he passed on. You cut these down at the end of summer, water, feed, bring them back up into growth. You'll get another great display of Salvia nemorosa varieties in autumn. Then there's David's impressive cut flower and veggie garden. And there's lots of trials happening here too. Look at these displays. I've never seen peony poppies quite like this, and a great array of colours. You may never thought of growing these as cut flowers. They need a couple of florist tips. When you cut the stems, you can either burn them or stick the base of the stem in hot water just for a few seconds. It seals it off so that the flower's going to last in a vase. One of my favourites would have to be the delphiniums, generally grown in cool climates of Australia, and the rest of us just look on with envy. Well, there are some of the big old ones that you can grow, bred in New Zealand, and we can grow them here in warm climates. A fabulous cut flower plant. And here in the veggie patch, there's lots of things coming up trumps. Now, we're all growing lettuce and mignonette today, but this is quite different. It's a variety called Salanova. Very even, uniform growth. And look at the colour. Looks great in a salad. Yes, you could cut the whole plant and it'll regrow 2 or 3 new plants, but even better still, harvest the outside leaves and you can keep harvesting from that one plant for many months. The nursery is a true testament to the fact that you can create an oasis just about anywhere, regardless of what nature throws at you. You know, Jace, I've visited David at Lambley's on multiple occasions in different seasons of the year, and his garden is in flower every single time. That's every time without fail. Not only is David an international plant breeder, he holds a staggering number of international plant patents. So he hasn't just turned a challenging environment into a beautiful garden, he's turned his extreme difficulties into a business for profit.
That's clever and inspiring, and it just goes to show you can have a garden in any environment if you've got the passion to make it happen.
Well, that's right. By carefully researching your plant selection, you'll eventually find the ones that are going to work for you. When you do, you repeat, repeat, repeat them.
Well, that's all, folks. I hope we've inspired you to tackle that difficult spot in the garden. And if you need more inspiration, join us next time as we uncover even more secrets of beautiful gardens.
Bye for now. Next time, Secrets of Beautiful Gardens is headed to the countryside.
I love this because it's practical and it's pretty.
Inspired by everything from the clipped hedges of formal European gardens, the work is brilliant. It's an absolute masterpiece. To the rustic charm of the Aussie bush.
Rarely am I lost for words, but this space here is work of a genius.
These country gardens prove that when you have the luxury of gardening on an epic scale, I've never seen anything quite like this, and I just love it. The only limit to what can be achieved is the imagination.
Now that is a dream worth having.